Chapter 13. The Relationship Test. The relentless machinery of idol comeback promotion had fully kicked back into gear. 3 weeks after their showcase concert, C7 plunged back into the familiar whirlwind of music show appearances, radio interviews, fan signing events, and non-stop rehearsals that made up the usual promotional cycle. Their schedules were packed in 15-minute blocks, and their days stretched far beyond what a person could usually endure. In the brief moments between obligations, those precious fragments of time snatched in waiting rooms, while traveling between venues, or during rare meal breaks, each member faced the growing challenge of maintaining their relationships. What had flourished in the spaciousness of unscheduled time now struggled to survive in the compressed reality of comeback demands. For Silas, this challenge had become especially intense. Sitting in the corner of their dressing room at KBS Studios, he hesitated, his phone in hand, a half-written message to MiRe left unsent for the 4th consecutive day. Around him, the other members got ready for their upcoming performance, their pre-show routines so automatic they needed little conscious thought. "Just send it already," Jon advised quietly, noticing Silas's dilemma as he adjusted his stage outfit. "The perfect wording doesn't exist." Silas frowned, thumb hovering over the screen. "The message contains insufficient explanation for my extended communication absence, while suggesting continued interest despite logistical complications." "See if I got it right," Julian translated from across the room, simultaneously stretching, checking his hair, and monitoring social media responses to their morning radio appearance. "You're trying to say, 'Sorry I disappeared for 4 days, but come back is crazy. I still want to see you if that's okay.'" Silas's gaze deepened, though he did not oppose Julian's accurate translation. Virtual communication requires accurate expression to reduce interpretive ambiguity. "Or," Jon suggested gently, "you could just be honest about the situation instead of crafting a deliberate explanation." Before Silas could respond, their stage manager appeared at the door with the familiar announcement, "C7, stand by in 2 minutes." With a frustrated sigh, Silas pocketed his phone without sending the message, the opportunity lost once again. As he joined his bandmates in their pre-show formation, his focused expression carried an edge of discontent. "The producer is deliberately sabotaging it," the film director murmured to his assistant, as they observed from a discreet distance. Classic self-fulfilling prophecy pattern. Fascinating character development. Overhearing this assessment, Silas shot the director a glare that would have intimidated others. The film crew had become an extra complication in their already difficult balancing act between performances and dating, observers watching their navigation of that exact complexity. As they moved toward the stage, Julian bounced beside Silas. "You're overthinking this," he advised, his playful tone serious. "MiRe isn't expecting poetry. Just a note, even if it's imperfect." "Our current schedule allows little personal time each day," Silas replied tersely. "Allocated mainly to essential biological functions. Having any time for anything else within such constraints is improbable." "Only if you approach it as a mathematical equation, rather than a human relationship," Julian countered with insight. "Hope and I exchanged 30-second voice messages between her classes and my rehearsals. Quality over quantity, remember?" Before Silas could respond, they reached their positions for the pre-recording interview segment. As cameras focused on their composed expressions and enthusiasm, the other conversations were necessarily shelved in favor of the interview. Yet Julian's observation lingered in Silas's mind as they proceeded through the familiar promotional routines. As the film director suggested, was he deliberately sabotaging his connection with MiRe? The question remained unanswered, as the underlying tension between Silas's desire for ongoing interaction and his fear of imperfect navigation started to solidify into a decision point that couldn't be postponed forever. Silas and all 7 members were undergoing the relationship test in various ways. The question was whether their connections could withstand comeback demands, and whether they would allow those connections to adapt, rather than use duties as a pretext for preemptive retreat. Jon had always been the most adaptable member of C7. His natural flexibility allowed him to navigate the unpredictable demands of idle life with relatively minimal stress. This adaptability extended to his link with Sol, whose work obligations as a food critic created scheduling complications that mirrored his own. They had developed a system: brief meetings when their schedules aligned, food photographs shared during separations, and occasional voice messages discussing culinary theories. It was not conventional dating, but it offered continuity, despite their respective professional demands. Tonight marked their first proper dinner together in nearly 2 weeks, a precious 3-hour window discovered between Jon's final schedule and Sol's restaurant review assignment. Jon had spent every free moment over the past 3 days, planning and preparing a special meal that would convey what words often could not during their limited time together. Everything was perfect, or as perfect as possible given the constraints. The table in his apartment was elegantly set, with ingredients prepared and a cooking timeline calculated. Jon even coordinated with manager Kando to ensure no unexpected schedule changes would disrupt this carefully arranged opportunity. He had not anticipated Sol arriving 20 minutes late. Her expression was strained, and her pretty face showed cracks of distress. "I apologize for the delay," she said formally as Jon welcomed her. An unanticipated situation arose requiring immediate attention. "Is everything okay?" Jon asked, concern overriding his momentary disappointment about adjustments to his carefully planned meal. Sol hesitated, her directness faltering slightly. "My critical assessment of Chef Epicure's new restaurant was published this morning." His response was not flattering. "What happened?" He posted an extensive social media rebuttal questioning my credentials, culinary insight, and critical objectivity, Sol explained with forced detachment that could not quite disguise her hurt. The situation escalated when several influential industry figures joined his criticism. "That's completely unprofessional," Jon said firmly, leading her to the couch rather than the dining table, where she had forgotten the prepared dinner. "Criticism is part of the restaurant ecosystem. Personal attacks are never appropriate responses." "The timing is problematic," Sol continued, her voice maintaining its even tone despite the distress. "My independent review platform launches next week. This controversy could significantly impact initial credibility establishment." As she explained the situation, Jon saw her struggling with deep uncertainty and pain, suggesting that their trust extended beyond their shared love of cooking. Jon listened, their carefully planned dinner receding in importance as this moment of intimate exchange took precedence. When Sol finally finished her lengthy explanation, he responded not with immediate solutions or empty reassurances, but with a question that addressed her frustration. "How are you feeling about this, beyond the implications?" he asked gently. "I'm hurt. I maintain objectivity in all reviews, regardless of personal preference. Having my integrity publicly questioned feels painful, despite recognizing the criticism's nature." "Would you like me to read the review?" Jon asked. "Not to offer solutions, but just to understand more completely." Sol hesitated, then nodded, retrieving her tablet from her bag. As Jon read her assessment of Chef Epicure's restaurant, acknowledging strengths, never cruel but unflinchingly honest about shortcomings. In contrast, Chef Epicure's retaliatory post dropped professional debate in favor of a personal attack. It questioned Sol's qualifications and integrity, highlighting her creation of a platform separate from traditional review channels. "This isn't about your review," Jon concluded as he finished reading. "It's about your independence. You are establishing your review channel outside traditional gatekeeping structures. That threatens established power dynamics." "That's an interesting perspective. Do you think the attack shows institutional resistance to independent review platforms rather than a direct response to my assessment?" "I think it's both," Jon acknowledged. "Your review was honest, but the disproportionate response suggests fear of changing influence structures." As they continued discussing the situation, their conversation navigated from the specific incident to broader questions about critics' integrity, independent platforms, and handling professional challenges. The prepared dinner was temporarily forgotten. When Jon finally remembered the meal, nearly an hour into their conversation, he laughed ruefully. "I had this perfect dinner planned. Multiple courses, perfect pairing. And now everything's cold." Adaptation often yields a better experience. "Perhaps we could prepare something together, rather than adhering to disrupted plans." The suggestion was so counter to their usual dynamic, where Jon cooked while Sol evaluated. "I'd like that," he said. Julian and Hope developed a highly innovative way to stay united despite their busy schedules. Their shared limitless energy and creative problem-solving turned limited contact opportunities into what Julian excitedly called the compressed adventure optimization protocol, which essentially packs the most experience into the least time. This explained why Julian was rushing through a shopping mall around midnight, avoiding sleep-deprived security guards, while trying to finish a scavenger hunt Hope had created for the 37-minute gap between his last scheduled obligation and his minimum sleep requirement. "Found it," he shouted into his phone as he spotted the mechanical cat figurine behind a closed storefront display, marked item number 7 on Hope's cryptic clue list. "Only 3 items left, and 14 minutes to go. I'm beating my previous record." "The next clue requires melodic interpretation," Hope's voice responded through his earbuds. "Remember the song from our dance battle last week? The coordinates are hidden in the chorus rhythm pattern." For Roman and Ellie, adapting their schedule involved using a shared digital calendar with color-coded availability blocks and automatic notification systems. It prioritized interactions according to mutual compatibility. While others might have seen such a structured method as sterile or unromantic, Roman and Ellie chose this elegant solution, which matched their shared appreciation for organized systems and order. Tonight's video call followed their usual pattern, covering work updates and shared interests. "The museum's botanical committee has approved my illustrated proposal," Ellie reported with enthusiasm. "Original drawings will be included alongside historical specimens. Congratulations on the integration of your academic expertise and artistic capability. The project scope required adjustment to accommodate my curatorial responsibilities," Ellie acknowledged. "But the departmental reception suggests potential for artistic-academic integration in future exhibitions." While others expressed their feelings in conventional emotional language, Roman and Ellie found comfort in a shared matter-of-fact appreciation. Their connection is no less meaningful. As their scheduled 30 minutes neared its conclusion, Roman asked a question about Ellie's experience with the botanical illustration process. "Beyond technical execution, has the artistic component provided a satisfactory expressive outlet for creative aspects of your cognitive processing?" he inquired with interest. "Yes," she acknowledged. "Integrating scientific observation with artistic interpretation creates an unexpected balance between analytical and intuitive processing. A complementary harmony I hadn't fully anticipated. Similar to our interaction, Roman observed with metaphorical expression. Architecture as living space. For Vic and Sarah, staying connected during comeback intensity required little change to their usual interaction patterns. This explained why their brief 30-minute chat at a charity event, with Vic representing C7 and Sarah fulfilling modeling commitments, had a touch of Cupid, despite taking place in a crowded reception surrounded by industry professionals and cameras. The sanctuary foundations are complete, Sarah reported quietly as they stood, seemingly discussing the event's artistic installations. Structural elements are emerging from prepared ground, despite seasonal transitions. Growth cycles continue regardless. To outsiders, their exchange might seem like casual small talk or a professional discussion about the artistic elements around them. Winter garden requires different tending, Vic continued, communicating his regret about limited availability during the intensive promotion period. Dormant periods precede renewed growth. Seasonal cycles serve a natural purpose, Sarah responded with understanding. Preparation periods enable sustained flourishing, rather than preventing eventual bloom. Perhaps the most visibly transformative relationship test was Jake and Tina's, whose artistic collaboration had evolved in tandem with their courting. Their contemporary dance began during C7's break and was completed despite comeback schedule constraints. It premiered tonight at a small but prestigious performance venue. Jake would publicly present work separate from his C7 appearances. The familiar pre-performance routine felt different as he prepared backstage. There was no coordinated styling team, in-ear monitors, or 6 other members sharing the waiting space. It was just Jake and Tina, preparing for an experience more intimate and exposing than any stadium concert he had ever performed. "Nervous?" Tina asked quietly, noticing his stillness as they stretched in preparation for the task. "Yes," Jake admitted with directness. "But not about the performance." Tina nodded understandingly. No further explanation was needed. The nervousness was not about missing the steps, as both were exceptionally trained dancers, capable of flawless execution. It was about presenting something different, after years of staged choreography designed for maximum audience reaction. This dance lacked crowd-pleasing moves or visually spectacular sequences, and there was no consideration for camera angles or potential viral moments. What made tonight special was the audience Jake invited to hear their opinions. Along with the modern dance community, special guests waited in the auditorium. Jake's parents, seeing their son perform his work for the first time, the other C7 members attending despite exhaustion from their demanding schedule, and select music professionals whose opinions Jake valued more than commercial success. Additionally, the cameras were notably absent. 5 minutes, the stage manager announced quietly. Jake and Tina moved through their final preparation sequence in synchronized silence, the familiar rhythm requiring no verbal communication. Months of practice had created an understanding beyond words, with each recognizing and responding to the other's most subtle adjustments through a shared physical language built from countless hours in the dance studio. As the house lights dimmed and the performance began, Jake felt a sense of unusual clarity. Each movement carried dual awareness, the execution and the emotional intention that Tina had helped him discover. The separation between these aspects gradually dissolved as they danced. In the audience, the 6 other C7 members watched, awestruck, as their youngest bandmate revealed artistic depth they had glimpsed but never fully witnessed during their years performing together. When the dance ended amid applause, the most meaningful response was not loud cheers, but the hardly noticeable tears Jake saw on his mother's face when he looked toward his parents' seats. As Jake and Tina took their bowing positions, their hands met in the traditional gesture of acknowledgement for the performance. Later, As they accepted congratulations from audience members and fellow artists at the small reception following their performance, the other C7 members approached their usual playful dynamic. "That was a dance pun," Jon began, searching for adequate words. Unlike the other members, whose connections had developed adaptation strategies during comeback intensity, James and Muse were still rebuilding the trust foundation, while simultaneously determining appropriate boundaries for whatever was growing between them. The situation required thoughtful navigation of emotional restoration and practical limitations, a challenge James approached with patience, despite his natural impulsiveness. Their current meeting spot reflected this consideration: a small community garden attached to a senior center where Muse volunteered on weekends. It was secluded enough to avoid public attention, yet relaxed sufficient for honest conversation without constant caution. James sat on a wooden bench, watching Muse guide several older men and women through plant care activities. James arrived early to help with setup, but then observed Muse in her environment before they interacted directly. The arrangement served multiple purposes, providing practical help with her volunteer work, ensuring a discreet arrival to avoid public attention, and most importantly, giving James the chance to see Muse being herself in settings entirely separate from his complicated idol world. "Mr. Hyam, you need to water the roots, not the leaves," Muse patiently explained to an elderly gentleman who seemed more interested in observing her than following horticultural instructions. "Plants drink through their soil, not their foliage." "At my age, I forget where things go in," the elderly man replied with a mischievous smile that suggested his confusion might be somewhat strategic. "Pretty teachers make learning difficult for old men with poor memory." "Mr. Hyam, you were Korea's leading agricultural scientist for 40 years, Muse reminded him with affectionate exasperation. "I think you remember perfectly well how plants absorb water." The elderly scientist's joyful laughter at being caught in his attention-seeking scheme made James smile. James saw in this moment the same warmth and honesty that attracted him to Muse during their kindergarten project. When the session concluded and the elderly participants departed for their afternoon activities, Muse finally joined James on the garden bench. "Sorry for the wait," she said, accepting the water bottle he offered. "Mr. Hyam always needs extra attention. He misses teaching at the university and uses any opportunity to demonstrate his knowledge, even while pretending confusion." "I enjoyed watching," James assured her honestly. "You adapt your teaching approach for different ages without changing. It's impressive." "Teaching is teaching," Muse shrugged, though her expression suggested appreciation for his observation. "The basic principles remain constant, regardless of student age, and respect for individual learning processes. 5-year-olds require more dinosaur references and bathroom break management than 85-year-olds. "How was the music show recording?" Muse asked, shifting to acknowledge his professional reality rather than avoiding it. "The kindergartners are still performing your choreography during recess, though with significantly more interpretive freedom than your official version." "I'd like to see that," James said, smiling, appreciating her interest in his work and the amusing mental image of kindergartners performing freestyle versions of C7's choreographed routines. The recording was a standard procedure: 14 hours of waiting for 7 minutes of action, multiple takes for camera angles, despite a supposedly live broadcast, and enough hairspray to create our hole in the ozone layer. Muse laughed at his candidly unspectacular description of the reality of idol lives. "Very glamorous. I can see why you needed special training from birth to prepare for such thrilling work." Their comfortable exchange, gently teasing without malice, acknowledging reality without pretense, marked significant progress in their gradual process of rebuilding their connection. While their early post-twin switch interactions had been carefully measured and somewhat hesitant, comfort had started to re-establish itself through consistent honesty and mutual respect for their separate realities. "I have something for you," James said after a moment, reaching into his bag. "Nothing too elaborate, just something that made me think of you." He handed her a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. Muse opened it to reveal a set of colorful markers with detachable magnetic bases. This practical teaching tool allowed for both whiteboard use and secure storage without requiring it to be rolled away. "These are perfect," she said, examining the clever design. "How did you know my classroom markers keep disappearing into the mysterious black hole that seems to exist specifically for teaching supplies?" "You mentioned it during our curriculum planning session," James replied, pleased by her positive reaction. "These were designed by an education supply company, started by former teachers. They understand the practical challenges beyond just colorful marketing." Muse looked at him with surprise. "You remember that conversation?" "It was weeks ago, and I was rambling about random classroom frustrations." "I remember most things you say. Even random classroom supply complaints. They're part of your world, which makes them interesting regardless of subject matter." Muse smiled at his self-aware framing. Very profound for someone who once thought twin switching was a reasonable relationship development strategy. "I contain multitudes," James replied with mock seriousness before breaking into laughter at his own past mistakes. "Terrible judgment and occasional philosophical insight can coexist in the same person." As evening approached and their limited time together drew to a close, James mentioned the reality that had become central to their rebuilding process. "My schedule for next week is intense," he confessed. 3 music show recordings, 2 fan signing events, and the variety show filming that always runs until dawn, regardless of how it's scheduled. "Hence why you look like you've been surviving on caffeine and willpower," Muse observed in her teasing tone. "Remarkably accurate assessment," James smiled ruefully. "The comeback cycle is always most demanding during the first month. It gradually becomes more manageable as promotions progress." Muse nodded, her expression thoughtful. "We're considering limited interaction possibilities for the next few weeks." "Unfortunately, yes," James confirmed. "Though I can still manage the Saturday afternoon arrangement, if that suits your schedule. It just means I'll have approximately 4 hours of sleep beforehand." "Which is completely unsustainable," Muse pointed out practically. "Your health matters more than maintaining arbitrary meeting frequency during intensive work periods." "We can adjust," she continued with problem-solving directness. "Maybe fewer in-person meetings, but more voice messages? Or shorter interactions that do not require elaborate planning. The goal is to stay in touch without additional stress during your intensive schedule." "Thank you," James said, the words carrying more than their brevity might suggest. "Thank you for understanding the situation without making me feel guilty about professional obligations I can't change." "Relationships aren't about identical investment formulas that never vary," Muse replied with insight. "They're about balanced reciprocity over time. Currently, your work requires intense focus. Later, my teaching schedule might become more demanding. We adjust accordingly rather than expecting perfect consistency, regardless of external reality." As they reached the garden gate, where James's manager waited discreetly in an unmarked company car, Muse surprised him with an unexpected affection. "Take care of yourself during this intensive period, eat well, sleep well, stay healthy," she said. "I'll watch your performances and send encouraging thoughts, even if we can't meet as often." "I'll be thinking of you too," James replied, straightforwardly acknowledging. "And I'll maintain contact however works best for your schedule." As James settled into the company car, Manager Kando hardly refrained from commenting on the personal interaction he had witnessed. During previous negotiations, the cameras were absent from this meeting, preserving the gradually rebuilding connection, as documented publicly, despite its significance to James's personal development. Late that night, in the C7 dorm, 7 dog-tired young men gathered in their living room, despite being physically exhausted from their grueling promotional schedule. Jon had suggested the impromptu meeting as a rare opportunity to process what they were each experiencing separately as their various relationships faced the practical reality test of comeback demands. The cameras had been officially deactivated for the night, one of the few boundaries all members had unanimously insisted upon during production negotiations. These private moments remained essential for maintaining their collective sanity amid constant observation. "So," Jon began once they had settled into their familiar positions, "we're 3 weeks into comeback promotions. How's everyone handling the relationship navigation amid schedule insanity?" The responses came in tired but thoughtful succession. "MiRe hasn't responded to my texting for 4 days, Silas grunted. Translation: You're overthinking perfect wording instead of just sending something quick, and now you're afraid you've waited too long to reach out, Julian interpreted. Silas did not contradict this assessment. His impassive expression showed rare concern. The statistical probability of maintaining a meaningful connection during comeback intensity was minimal. My communication approach failure may have accelerated the inevitable conclusion. Or, Jon suggested gently, you could simply acknowledge the situation honestly rather than preemptively declaring statistical failure. Imperfect communication often means more than perfectly composed delayed messages. Silas nodded slightly, uncertainty visible beneath his definitive demeanor. A hypothesis worth testing despite significant requirements. What about everyone else? Jon continued, moving the conversation forward while allowing Silas to process space. Any significant developments amid our chaos? Hope and I completed 17 micro-adventures, despite scheduling complications, Julian. Quality through intensity, rather than quantity through duration. Our record is 4 separate activities within 27 minutes. Sarah and I maintain a connection through established patterns, Vic contributed quietly. Metaphorical expression, creating consistent exchange despite limited direct interaction. Ellie and I have implemented our synchronized communication protocol with 94% scheduling accuracy, Roman reported. Tina and I presented our collaborative piece, Jake added with unusual openness. Artistic expressions beyond performance requirements despite schedule limitations. Sol survived a criticism response requiring unexpected support priority, Jon acknowledged. Muse and I are rebuilding trust gradually, James contributed when his turn came. More trusting foundation, developing through honest acknowledgement of past mistakes and current limitations. The trust recovery process demonstrates promising progression indicators, Roman observed. Thanks, James smiled, understanding the encouragement within Roman's characteristic vocabulary. It's different than before. Messy but somehow more meaningful. As their conversation continued, 7 exhausted young men, openly discussing emotional territory, a sense of camaraderie settled over the group. Beyond their connection as C7, beyond even their friendship, developed through years of shared experience, they had evolved a deeper understanding of each other as individuals navigating similar challenges through different approaches. The cameras captured their evolution in performance and public navigation. Still, these private moments of collective reflection remained unobserved. 7 individuals processed together what they were each experiencing separately. Not performance, but reality, not presentation, but authentic exchange. Whatever challenges their continuing comeback promotions presented to their connections, they faced them not just as C7, but as 7 individuals who had discovered aspects of themselves worth preserving, despite the demands of the music industry and public scrutiny.